Chapter 10. What They Saw from the Folly. As the night wore on, they travelled through many pretty villages to a countryside wilder than any they had yet seen. There were more woods and heaths, fewer farms. So wild was it that Pungo would risk no short-cuts, and stuck cautiously to the roads, which were narrow and twisted. The moon was behind clouds, so he could not read what few signposts there were. "I'm so afraid we may go through our village without knowing it," he said. "For as we have not been able to send any news by the twilight barking, nobody will be on the lookout for us." But he was wrong. Suddenly, out of the darkness, came a loud meow. They stopped instantly. Just ahead of them, up a tree, was a tabby cat. She said, "Pongo and Missus, I suppose you are friendly." "Yes, indeed, madame," said Pongo. "Are you by any chance the cat who helped to find our puppies?" "That's me," said the cat. "Oh, thank you," cried Missus. The cat jumped down. "Sorry to seem suspicious of you, but some dogs just can't control themselves when they see a cat. Not that I've ever had any trouble. Well, here you are." "How very kind of you to keep watch for us, madame," said Pongo. "No hardship. I'm usually out at night. You can call me Tib. My real name's Pussy Willow, but that's too long for most people. A pity, really, as it's a name I could fancy." "It suits you so well," said Pongo, in a courtly tone he had picked up from the spaniel. With your slender figure and soft grey paws." He was taking a chance in saying this, for it was too dark for him to see her figure, let alone her paws. The cat was delighted. "Well, I have kept my figure, and it was my paws got me the name Pussy Willow. Now you'll be wanting a bite of food and a good long rest. Please tell us if all is still well with our puppies," said Missus. It was yesterday afternoon when I last saw them. Lively as crickets and fat as butter they were." "Could we see them? Just a glimpse before we eat or sleep?" asked Missus. "We can't climb trees, as Mrs. Willow can," said Pongo. "You won't need to," said the cat. "The Colonel's made other arrangements, but you can't see the puppies before they are let out for exercise. And that'll be hours yet. Those Battens are late risers. Well, come along and meet the Colonel." "A human colonel?" asked Missus, puzzled. "Bless me, no. The Colonel's our sheepdog. A perfect master of strategy. You ask the sheep. He calls me his lieutenant." The cat was now leading them along the road. Pongo asked how far it was to the farm. "Oh, we're not going to the farm now. The Colonel's spending the night at the Folly. Crazy place, but it's coming in very useful." The darkness was thinning. Soon the road ran across a stretch of heath on which, still some way ahead of them, a dark mass stood out against the gradually lightening sky. After a few moments, Pongo saw that the dark mass was a great stone wall. "There you are," said the cat. "Your puppies are behind that." "It looks like a wall of a prison," said Pongo. "Nasty place," said the cat. "The Colonel will tell you its history." She led them from the road over the rough grass of the heath. As they drew nearer, Pongo saw that the wall curved, as the wall of a round tower curves. Above it rose the trunks of tall trees, their bare branches black against the sky. You'd think there would be a castle, at least, inside that huge wall, said the cat. And they do say there was going to be, only something went wrong. All that's there now, well, you can see for yourself. She led the way to the rusty iron gates, and Pongo and Mrs. peered through the bars. There was now enough light for them to see some distance. Beyond a stretch of grass as wild as the surrounding heath, they saw a glint of water. But strangely, it seemed to be black water. Then they saw the reason why. Reflected in it was a black house. It was the most frightening house Pongo and Mrs. had ever seen. Many of the windows in its large, flat face had been bricked up, and those that were left looked like eyes and a nose, with the front door of a mouth. Only there were too many eyes, and the nose and the mouth were not quite in the right places, so that the whole face looked distorted. "It's seen us," gasped Mrs., and it really did seem as if the eyes of the house were staring at them from its cracked and peeled black face. "Well, that's Hell Hall for you," said the cat. She moved on, and they followed her, round the curving wall. After a few minutes they saw a tower rising high above the tree-tops. It was built of rough grey stone, like the wall, and was rather like a church tower. But there was no church. The tower simply jutted out of the wall. Some of the narrow windows were broken, and their stonework was crumbling. The place was not yet a ruin, but looked as if it quite soon might be one. "Well, may they call it a folly," said the cat. Mrs. did not know what the word meant, but Pongo had seen a folly before and was able to explain. The name is often given to expensive odd buildings built for no sensible reason. Buildings that it was a foolishness to build. The cat meowed 3 times, and there were 3 answering barks from inside the tower. A moment later came the sound of a bolt being drawn back. "The Colonel's the only dog I've ever known who could manage bolts with his teeth," said the cat proudly. Pongo instantly decided he would learn to manage bolts. Come in," said a rumbling voice. "But let me have a look at you first. There's not much light inside yet." An enormous sheepdog came out. Pongo saw at once that this was none of your dapper military men, but a lumbering old soldier man, possibly a slow thinker but widely experienced. His eyes glittered shrewdly and kindly through his mass of grey and white woolly hair. "Glad to see you're large Dalmatians," he said approvingly. "I've nothing against small dogs, but the size of all breeds should be kept up. Well now, what's been happening to you?" "There was a rare to-do on the twilight barking last night, when no one had any news of you." He led the way into the Folly, while Pongo told of their day with the spaniel. "Sounds a splendid fellow," said the Colonel. "Sorry he's not on the barking. Now, tucking you two, I provided breakfast just in case you turned up." There was plenty of good farmhouse food and a deep round tin full of water. "How did you get it all here?" asked Pongo, astonished. "I rolled the round tin from the farm, with the food inside it," said the Colonel. "I stuffed the tin with straw so that the food wouldn't fall out, and then I borrowed a small seaside bucket from my young pet Tommy. The dear little chap would lend me anything. I can carry that bucket by its handle. 6 trips to the pond on the heath got the water here. Lucky it thawed yesterday. Drink up. Plenty more where that came from." The cat acted as hostess during the meal. Pongo was careful always to address her as Mrs. Willow. "What's this Mrs. Willow business?" said the Colonel suddenly. Pussy Willow happens to be my given name," said the cat, "and I'm certainly a Mrs."
"You've got too many names," said the Colonel. "You're Puss because all cats are Puss. You're Pussy Willow because it's your given name. You're Tib because most people call you that. I call you Lieutenant or Lieutenant Tib. I thought you liked it."
"I like Lieutenant, but not Lieutenant Tib."
"Well, you can't be Mrs. Willow. On top of everything else, you can't have 6 names."
"I'm entitled to 9 names, as I've 9 lives," said the cat.
But I'll settle for Lieutenant.
"But I'll settle for Lieutenant Willow, with Puss for playful moments."
"Right," said the Colonel. "And now we'll show our guests their sleeping quarters."
"Oh, please," begged Mrs. "Couldn't we get just a glimpse of the puppies before we sleep?" The cat shot a quick look at the Colonel and said, "I've told them the pups won't be out for hours yet."
"Besides, you'd get too excited to sleep," said the Colonel. "You must both have a good rest before you start worrying."
"Worrying?" said Pungo sharply. "Is something wrong?"
"I give you my word there is nothing wrong with your puppies," said the Colonel.
Pungo and Mrs. believed him, and yet they both thought there was something odd about his voice, and about the look the cat had given him.
"Now, up we go," the Colonel went on briskly. "You're sleeping on the top floor because that's the only floor where the windows aren't broken. Want a ride, Lieutenant Whip? I mean, Lieutenant Tillo? Oh, good heavens, cat!"
"If there's one thing I object to being called, it's playing cat," said the cat.
"Quite right. I don't like being called plain dog," said the Colonel. "I apologize, Lieutenant Willow. Now, jump on my back unless you want to walk."
The cat jumped onto the Colonel's back and held on by his long hair. Pongo had never before seen a cat jump on a dog's back with friendly intentions. He was deeply impressed, both by the Colonel's trustfulness and the cat's trustworthiness. The narrow, twisting stairs went up through 5 floors of the Folly, most of them full of broken furniture, old trunks, and all manner of rubbish. On the top floor was a deep bed of straw, brought up by the Colonel in a sack. But what interested Mrs. far more was the narrow window. Surely it must look towards Hell Hall. She ran to see. Yes, beyond the treetops and a neglected orchard was the back of the black house, which was as ugly as the front, though it did not have such a frightening expression. At one side was a large stable yard. "Is that where the puppies will come out?" she asked.
Yes, yes," said the Colonel. "But it won't be for some time yet."
"I shall never sleep until I've seen them," said Mrs.
"Yes, you will, because I shall talk you to sleep," said the Colonel. "Your husband has asked me to tell him the history of Hell Hall. Now come and lie down."
Pongo was as anxious to see the puppies as Mrs. was, but he knew they should sleep first, so he coaxed her to lie down. The Colonel pulled the straw round both of them.
"It's chilly in here. Not that I feel it," he said.
Then he sent the cat to start collecting food for the next meal, and he began to talk in his rumbling voice. This was the story he told. Hell Hall had once been an ordinary farmhouse named Hill Hall. It had been built by a farmer named Hill. It was about 200 years old, the same age as the farm where the sheepdog and the cat lived.
"The 2 houses are quite a bit alike," said the Colonel. "Our only place is painted white and well cared for. I remember Hell Hall before it was painted black, and it really wasn't bad at all.
The farmer named Hill had got into debt and sold Hill Hall to an ancestor of Cruella de Vil's, who liked its lonely position on the wild heath. He intended to pull the farmhouse down and build himself a fantastic house, which was to be a mixture of a castle and a cathedral, and had begun by building the surrounding wall and the Folly. The colonel had heard all this while visiting the vicarage. The vicarage. Once the wall, with its heavy iron gates, was finished, strange rumors began to spread. Villagers crossing the heath at night heard screams and wild laughter. Were there prisoners behind the prison-like wall? People began to count their children carefully.
Some of the stories, well, I shan't tell you just as you're falling asleep, said the colonel. I didn't hear them at the vicarage, but I will tell you something, because it won't upset you as it naturally upset the villagers. It was said that this Deville fellow had a long tail. I didn't hear that at the vicarage either.
Mrs. had taken in very little of this and was now fast asleep. But Pongo was keenly interested.
By this time, the colonel went on, people were calling the place Hell Hall, and the Deville chap playing Devil. The end came when the men from several villages arrived one night with lighted torches, prepared to break open the gates and burn the farmhouse down. But as they approached the gates, a terrific thunderstorm began and put the torches out. Then the gates burst open, seemingly of their own accord, and out came Deville, driving a coach and four, and the story is that lightning was coming not from the skies, but from the Deville blue forked lightning. All the men ran away screaming and never came back. And neither did Deville. The house stood empty for 30 years. Then someone rented it. It's been rented and rented again. But no one ever stays.
And it still belongs to the Deville family? Asked Pongo.
There's only Cruella Deville left of the family now. Yes, she owns it. She came down here some years ago and had the house painted black. It's red inside, I'm told. But she never lived here. She let the Bowden brothers have it rented free, as caretakers. I wouldn't let them take care of any kennel of mine.
Those were the last words Pongo heard, for as the story ended, sleep wrapped him round. The sheepdog stood looking down at the peaceful couple.
Well, they're in for a shock,
he thought, and then lumbered his way downstairs. It was less than an hour later when Mrs. opened her eyes. She had been dreaming of the puppies. She heard them barking, and they were barking. She sprang out of the straw and dashed to the window. No pup was to be seen, but she could hear the barking clearly. It was coming from inside the black house. Then the barking grew louder. The door to the stable yard opened, and out came a stream of puppies. Mrs. blinked. Surely her puppies could not have grown so much in less than a week. And surely she had not had so many puppies. More and more were hurrying out. The whole yard was filling up with fine, large, healthy Dalmatian puppies. But Mrs. raised her head in a wall of despair. These puppies were not hers at all. The whole thing was a mistake. Her puppies were still lost, perhaps starving, perhaps even dead. Again and again she howled in anguish. Her first howl had wakened Pongo. He was beside her in a couple of seconds and staring at the yard full of milling, tumbling puppies. And they were still coming out of the house. rather smaller puppies now. And then they saw him, smaller even than they had remembered. Lucky! There was no mistaking that horseshoe of spots on his back. And after him came Roly-Poly, falling over his feet as usual. Then Patch and the tiny cat pig and all the others as well, all lashing their tails, all eager to drink at the low troughs of water that stood about in the yard. Look! Patches is helping the cat pig to find a place, said Mrs. Delightly. But what does it mean? Where have all those other puppies come from? Dazed as he was with sleep, Bungo's keen brain had gone into instant action. He saw it all. Cruella must have begun stealing puppies months before, soon after that evening when she had said she would like a Dalmatian fur coat. The largest pups in the yard looked at least 5 months old. Then they went down and down in size. Smallest and youngest of all were his own puppies, which must obviously have been the last to be stolen. He had barely finished explaining this to Mrs. when the sheepdog reached the top of the stairs. He had been downstairs getting into fresh water, and he had heard Mrs. howl.
Well, now you know, he said. I was hoping you could have had your sleep out first.
But why are you both looking so worried? Asked Mrs. Our puppies are safe and well. Yes, my dear. You go on watching them, said Pungo gently. Then he turned to the Colonel.
You come downstairs and have a drink, my boy, said the Colonel.